where do you put that precious spend now in this current environment?
This week, we're returning to the Startup Clinic. I invited two early stage founders to the Astrid and Miyu studios so they can tell me exactly where they need help in their business.
I moved to the UK when I was 15. I asked my parents, I want to study abroad. Can you please send me?
That's like a real entrepreneur there.
How are you going to market? The big question. How do you find your customers? How do you market your brand?
And what is your burning question? Is that related to customers and marketing
It
today?
absolutely is.
I find it very difficult to focus on my personal life.
As a small brand, there's power to telling that personal story.
What would you do differently?
If I were to start a brand all over again, I would probably... Welcome to Unboxed. I'm your host, Connie Nam, the founder of Astrid and Miyu. In these conversations, I speak to founders, investors, and creators who are all breaking boundaries in their space to discover the person behind the brand and what it took for them to build their empires. For this segment of the Startup Clinic, I have with me Sooji Im, who's the founder of Chaum and Bium. Hi, Sooji.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in. I'm so excited to hear all about, because I love your products.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, I love your stuff and
Thank
I love
you,
your
thank
brand.
you.
So tell me about yourself and also your brand. You've got different concepts of your cafes.
Yeah, so Bium, which I started 4 years ago, it's a tea brand that's specifically focused on Korean teas. And Bium means to empty. So we want to create a place where you can empty a cup of tea, but also empty your mind as well. So that's, I mean, as you know, in Korean, that's how it translates. And Cheum, which we started last year, it means to fill. So we wanted to create a place where you fill through tea. So these are two sort of contrasting concepts, but I do think that obviously at the end of the day, it is a process of filling and emptying a cup of tea and also the mind as well.
Yeah, I love the juxtaposition of Pium and Chaum,
Thank
to
you.
fill and to empty. And what was the inspiration behind the concepts?
Buddhist monks used to drink tea as part of their ceremony, as part of their sort of rituals. And it was a process of, they talk about emptying and filling in Buddhism quite a lot. And I'm not particularly religious or anything, but I wanted to sort of go back to the origins of tea traditions in Korea and how it started out, and bring a part of that to London, to the UK, and to the European audience as well.
Yeah, I love the Buddhist and temple culture in Korea. I mean, I'm Christian. I grew up Christian, but like I love the whole philosophy and
Yeah,
the whole
exactly.
vibe.
Exactly, yeah.
of the
I'm
temples.
exactly the same, yeah.
And what about yourself?
So I actually was not an expert on tea. Tea was always a hobby. I actually used to do management consulting, and I wanted to make my hobby a job, essentially, and I wanted to spread the knowledge of Korean tea to the UK audience. I actually wanted to initially create a lifestyle brand, and with a focus on Korean items, Korean tea. So Korean tea was just gonna be a small aspect of it. And I started traveling to Korean tea farms, and I fell in love with the farmers and the farms and how they were processing the teas and the way that they were treating the products. So tea became really integral in my brand, and that's how I sort of started.
Yeah, and tell me about your origin as Korean. I'm Korean too,
Yeah.
so like I'd love to hear about it. Like, where in Korea are you from? When did you move to the UK? You said you were 15. You spoke no word of English, and you were in Isle of Wight with a family attending boarding school. So tell me a bit about your
yeah.
earlier years.
So I moved to the UK. Well, I'm originally from Incheon, Korea, and I moved to the UK when I was 15. I asked my parents, I want to study abroad. Can you please send me? So we found.
And you had no family and friends here
No.
whatsoever. That's like a real entrepreneur there.
At age of 15, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to. I don't know why the UK specifically. I couldn't even tell you now. But I chose the UK, and then I actually studied on the Isle of Wight, out of all places. I went to school there, and then I came to London to study economics and philosophy. Yeah, I have been living abroad ever since I was 15, basically. I feel very much at heart in Korean, but I feel like my sort of my Koreanness comes out more outside of Korea, and maybe that's why I always wanted to live abroad.
And what is your pressing question today?
My pressing question for you is often when the brand's story is personal, it reaches a certain audience, but I find that it doesn't go beyond that. And how do we keep that balance of keeping it personal enough that it has a good story, but also it reaches a larger audience?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's something that I think about as well. Just to understand context, so I can give you, I guess, a clearer answer or advice. Can you tell me a bit about what stage you are in your business? You've got 2 cafes, but
Yeah.
like, what's your revenue? How many people do you have? And what your ultimate vision is?
So my ultimate vision at the moment is to have more online presence. Especially for Miyu, we want to reach out to a larger audience, more
To sell your merchandise.
exactly,
Yeah.
to do more wholesale, to grow bigger in terms of sort of product. As I said, just reaching a larger audience. When it's limited to the cafe, as much as we enjoy meeting the customers, right now, as you said, we have 2 places. We do have a more stable revenue, I'd say, but it doesn't go beyond that. I find that it's quite limited. To
It's
that
harder to
space.
scale.
Exactly, and I find that the reason why it's not scaling up as quickly as I'd like it to is because I feel like the brand story is quite personal, and it only reaches a certain category of people who are interested in Korean tea, who are interested in Korean products and Korean food. And while that's growing, thanks to K-beauty, K-pop, and K-everything,
Yes.
I find that it's still quite limited.
Do you say this from personal experience by experimenting with the story? What has been your experience? Because I would beg to differ. But tell me,
I think it could be because of the type of people that I come across, the type of customers that come into the store. And right now, our sort of retail or offline presence is stronger than our online presence. And that's also because I haven't been able to focus on the online and the wholesale presence as much. It's the type of people that come across.
Yeah. Well, if you had to categorize your current customers, are they like Korea fans, like K-pop fans, or
A lot
like
of them are interested, especially at the beginning of the
Yeah.
business. We attracted a lot of people who were just interested in Korea as a whole,
Yeah.
Korean culture or
Yeah.
Korean cafe culture.
Yeah.
Specifically. After some time, there were more people who were interested in our teas.
Yeah.
But I would say that's still a smaller portion of the customers.
Yeah. Okay. I get your dilemma.
Yeah,
I get your question now. So I think there's 2 parts of it. One is like telling your Korean story, and then another thing is telling your personal story. So I do think it might be limiting to tell that Korean story. I mean, not just because Korea is so well known with K-pop and K-beauty, so you might just attract people who are interested, and it's still very niche in England, whereas I think somewhere like America, it could be a huge market as well. So that's one thing which I totally understand. But I think telling a personal story, there's probably ways you can tell your personal story without playing the Koreanness too much. Or you can say like, I'm Korean, these are like from Korean farms. But there are elegant ways to kind of decouple that from K-pop or K-beauty by telling the, I guess, like producer story about a lot more, but not highlighting specifically the Koreanness too much.
Yeah.
So, and I think, especially as a small brand, there's power to telling that personal story. People can connect with you better. But I guess like the challenge is for you to attract those people that are connected to you, not necessarily because you're Korean, but because of that story and the benefits of the Korean matcha and the teas.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I spoke about this in the previous episode because one of the founders asked me about personal branding, and I think there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
I think pros is like it's a very effective and I mean, I wouldn't say cheap because your time is much more valuable than anything else. But if you have limited resources, like you just need to work harder personally to build that brand. So I think it's a very effective way of getting out there, especially when you're a small brand. But the con is like as you said, it might be harder to scale, especially if you don't have time, or like, what if you get injured and you have to be hospitalized, and you don't have time to do it?
Exactly.
It's so reliant on you.
Yeah.
So I think there's pros and cons. Initially, I think it's amazing. It would be very powerful to keep on telling your story, but tweaking it. I mean, I think like it's amazing to be Korean. I'm proud of you for being Korean and setting this up, but maybe like being a bit more subtle if you're concerned about like attracting just one type of audience, but telling that beautiful story of growing and health benefits and all of these things. But I guess putting a roadmap together to eventually step out of that through other content.
When you were scaling your business, did you talk much about the founder's story? Because there's always that, when you go into that about page on a brand, there's always, about or the founder's story. Did you ever?
No, I didn't really, funnily, because I was so focused on running the business, it didn't really occur to me. And I don't think it was as like founders were as prominent at that time. But if I were in your shoes, young, starting a brand, like I would probably go through that route.
Okay.
But I didn't at that time. And it's probably an opportunity that was missed.
So you would have done it if
I think so.
Okay, got it. Okay.
And you have such an exciting story, and you're the one that can tell the story the best. And obviously, like I've done this at smaller scale. When I did pop-ups, I was always there talking to the customer and things like that. But it wasn't a scaled version of storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. I find it very difficult to focus on my personal life sometimes, and things just get things happen and they get past me, and I don't even know what's really happened. And I find that I pay less and less attention to people that are in my life that I should be caring about. So how do you go on about that?
Oh, I think that's a really hard question as founders. I think that founders constantly juggle with this, but I think having a good team, once you have the resources and once you get to a certain scale, like prioritize hiring the right people, even if you had to pay like quite a lot of money for it, they always pay back instantly. So like just getting the right people is so important, and it really depends on what you want to do as a founder and what you love doing. I don't know like what you love doing and what you're energized by, and then like what you don't love. Like you need to hire someone who can just take away like what you don't like doing.
That's a very good answer.
Or multiples of people.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good answer. I can definitely think of some things I don't like to do. So
thank you so much, Sooji. That was so fun. I hope that was useful for you.
That was very useful for me. Thank you so much for having me.
For this segment, I'm joined by Sarah Sklevenites, founder of Messiah and Eve. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So good to see you again.
You too.
Can you tell us briefly about yourself and your business?
Messiah and Eve is a body skincare and fine fragrance brand. So we take all of the ingredients that you put on your face and put it into body care, and we mix it with bespoke fine fragrances that really last on your skin.
Yeah, I can really attest to this because my husband, Joe, he has eczema, and he's so picky with his skincare, and he really swears by like your body moisturizers.
Which is awesome to hear. Thank you.
And tell us a bit about yourself.
So I come from the corporate world. I'm not from the beauty industry or the fragrance industry, but I've always had a passion for fragrance. It's a thing that I've always loved ever since I was a child. So part of why I created Messiah and Eve is to fill a gap that I really felt existed, which was I want really beautiful fragrances, the kind of fragrances that you spray on yourself as a fine fragrance. And then I wanted body care to just simply be better. I wanted it to perform better. I wanted it to do everything that you want it to do on your face, but do it on your body. I looked out there, I thought, why do these two things not exist together? Why is there a fragrance component or there is a functionality component, but not together? And so that's
why does it not exist? Is it because it's expensive to formulate that?
I think it's expensive and it's hard. And I think taking the harder road is perhaps the one less traveled. And that either makes me smart or not so smart. But I think because actually, some people want fragrance. When you buy a perfume, you want the body cream to smell exactly like the perfume. And so that makes it hard to make the formula really effective on your skin. So the way we get around that, the way we fix that, the solution is that we work totally differently to everybody else. So we create an exceptional formulation for your skin, and then we hand it over to our fragrance house and say, make a fragrance in this.
And what were your earlier days like? Because you've been running the business and the brand for about 3 years now?
We turned 3 in August. So we're still early days, I guess. We're still in that phase, very much so. We were really fortunate. About 6 weeks after we launched, we got an enormous piece of press. I had a really great PR agency working for us. And so we had this breath of life that was breathed into the brand really early on. And it gave us our first cohort of customers that are still with us. So exceptionally grateful for that, and the journalists that did that. And so then you're figuring everything out. You're figuring out who your real customers are as opposed to who you think your customers are going to be. You want to keep them. You are figuring out what products are popular, what works, what doesn't. You're looking at your price points. You're looking at your margins. How are you going to make this profitable? How are you going to market it? The big question: how do you find your customers? How do you market your brand?
And what is your burning question? Is that related to customers and marketing
It
today?
absolutely is my burning question. It's always about marketing. It was my biggest concern going into the business. The cost of acquiring customers is so high now. So the question is, where do you put that precious marketing spend? We're a self-funded brand, so we don't have external investors. Where do you put that precious spend now in this current environment and climate?
I need to understand a bit of context about the business. If you can tell me what your current revenue is, if you're profitable, where you're allocating your spend on currently, and what has been effective and what hasn't been effective, that would be super helpful.
So when we started out, we had a PR agency, but we couldn't commit capital to a PR agency and social management and paid ads. So I've chosen not to do any paid activity at all. That absolutely has to change, but we have put money into PR. We've put money, which works sometimes and doesn't generate revenue all the time, but great for brand awareness. We've put money into content and social, which again is a great for brand awareness, great for when you meet people and they look at your Instagram and they go, oh, okay, you're a legitimate business. I don't think it really pushes the needle on revenue without the paid aspect. I do gifting of products to influencers, into goodie bags, to seed product in front of my customer. And we're not doing paid PR at the moment. So there is a big question for me around, is paid the way to go? Should I put paid actually into influencers over, say, paid ads? Should I just go get a PR agency again? Those kinds of questions linger in my mind daily.
Yeah. And which social channels are the most active channels for you?
At the moment, Insta. Our newsletter actually is our most revenue generating channel.
That makes sense, because those are repeat customers, and once they're hooked into your products, they become loyal. Like my husband and myself, we love your products.
Thank you, very kind. Yes. So, and then Instagram. I think, is Instagram a revenue generator for us? Probably not, but it's great for collaborations and awareness and positioning the brand and education, actually.
Yes,
I think
that makes sense. So I think in terms of marketing, there are different ways of thinking about it. There's top of funnel and bottom of funnel, as you know. Top of funnel means awareness. You can't necessarily track your revenue, and bottom of funnel is where you can track instantly where your sales are coming from. And I would say like PR is probably top of funnel and sometimes bottom of funnel as well when the story is told really well.
Yeah.
And what we find is product placements aren't as effective as they used to be, but a brand story talking about the company or the founder, that probably works well, especially when you're an early stage business, when it's a discovery for people. But I think that probably there's a plateau to that. So PR is like great, like initially. And then content creation, that needs to happen like consistently. And I would say like if you're not focused on TikTok, I say this multiples of times on different episodes, but if I were to start a brand all over again, I would probably build it around TikTok.
Yeah.
Because whenever we post things, like there's so much more opportunity for it to go viral. You don't know which one it will be, but if you consistently create content, like you can have that moment. Whereas with Instagram, it's very predictable, which is great. But sometimes like you don't have that like big hit moment, and you need to pay for that engagement sometimes and that reach. So I would say like create a lot of content on TikTok, either using influencers or like using yourself or like in-house social media person. You know, I think with your product, people need to be able to touch and feel ultimately. So what does your sales strategy look like? Or like, do you plan to open a store? Or do you plan to expand into retail?
So retail is the route for us. And we're in retail now, but small independent retailers rather than big retailers. And of course, we're D2C. I think international expansion is really important for us because, some of the biggest personal care and beauty markets are outside of the UK. So we need to look at distribution, and that's the next big step for me. Distribution into other international regions that perform really well with personal care.
Yeah.
But also to not forgetting the UK. UK is, hugely important. We are a British brand. So expanding that. But part of that, I think, also rests a lot on brand awareness, being successful in store.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you need to do it in tandem, and it's kind of like chicken and egg situation, which is so tricky for founders. So if you had unlimited resources, ideally you want to build up that brand and spend on marketing, and then you go into the retailers. But everyone has limited resources.
And I think that's where we're at. That again, as a self-funded brand, you don't have all the revenue to tick all the boxes all of the time. And it's part of the reason why I haven't pushed too hard on big retail, because actually you need a lot of resource. Once you're in store, that's just the beginning. Selling through in store is critical. So I think distribution is another really important avenue for us. And retail, so own retail, which I know obviously has made your brand so successful. I think we would need to have services like you do.
Yeah.
That's an entirely different piece of work, I think, that I would need to work on. So
you need to have that hook for people to want to come into the store. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I think that's something longer term for us, and obviously with a different set of capital as well. So short term, it definitely is building out D2C because margins are better in D2C, and building out retail.
Yeah, and I would also test out a bit of paid ads, because once you get that customer in, it sounds like they're quite loyal.
We are a really sticky brand, which we're really fortunate to have, but also, quite purposeful about making products that resonate, that people love, that bring them joy, that make you feel special. And that's what Messiah and Eve is about. So we have that stickiness. It's just, absolutely about getting it into people's hands so they can discover it. And discover
so I would
harmony.
allocate a small budget just for paid and see what that customer acquisition costs look like versus your lifetime value, or like assumption of your lifetime value, how frequently people buy, what that looks like during their lifetime. What about sampling? Sampling might be a great opportunity for you, given how sticky people are once they use your product.
Our sampling has been through such a journey. And we didn't get it right in the beginning. Interestingly, because we went down the sustainable route, which just didn't work. And so sampling has been this cost overhead that we just haven't got right yet. It's something that I agree is so critical. Being able to give people a sample, and a decent sized sample of your product, so they can experience it, particularly with body care, where 3 mils is not going to cut it on your body. You need something, meaningful. So I absolutely agree that we need to do sampling much better.
Yeah, I also feel like I discover a lot of beauty brands when I go to hotels, stay at nice boutique hotels. There's, like local brands that I've never thought about buying from, but I now buy from.
Yeah, so we have this small piece of our business, which is amenities. And I haven't built it out because it takes a bit of capital and a bit of working to get the catalog right. And I agree. It's just a great opportunity, particularly for brand awareness too, to get your products in front of these people who are already in this really lovely experience, in a hotel, and are open to trying things because it's in front of them. With scaling a brand, we're at this point where we need to find more of our customers, which I think every brand is trying to do. So what really pushed the needle for Astrid and Miyu, for you to reach that critical tipping point of growth that meant you were really making revenue that enabled you to do all the things that you need to do as a business?
That's a really good question.
And get your first hire, your CMO.
That's a really good question. So I put all my savings into the business. So my first hire was a huge investment. I mean, I wasn't paying her much at that time, but it was such a huge investment for me because we weren't making enough to pay her. But that was every penny was worth it. But when I thought I could go out to investors and pitch was when we reached 1 million in 12-month revenue. So how we did that was like, it didn't cost a lot in terms of marketing. We were actively posting on social media and Instagram. At that time was very easy to grow. So when I went out to investors, we already had around 30,000 followers as a small brand without spending anything. And we
That's
were
huge.
working with loads of bloggers at that time. They weren't called influencers. They weren't like paid influencers. They were writing journals on WordPress, and I would just send things to them. And press was also hugely impactful at that time. And also like other things that I did aside from marketing was I just listed products everywhere just to build that awareness. It didn't, I mean, I wouldn't advise people to do it, and I wouldn't do it this way now, but I put our products on Etsy. I put our products on Not on the High Street. I put our products on ASOS Marketplace, and always had like a little note about the brand so people would come back to the website. It was just like building awareness. I just wanted to build that awareness. I did loads of pop-ups for very cheaply. So I would go into boutiques or hair salons to see whether I can do a pop-up where people can experience. So it was all like very ground up. It wasn't one thing that really made the brand. It was multiples of things. And that kind of like allowed us to reach 1 million revenue at that time, which helped me raise my initial funding, because I guess like with the brand, it's hard to just go with an idea. You need some kind of traction and for investors to think it's credible. And then I opened our first store. And with the store, we added a couple of years on from customer feedback, ear piercing, welding, all these services. And I guess like that really got us in front of loads of customers, whereas before it was a very cult niche following, and we became a bit more broad once we opened a store. So it was a combination of everything at like different stages.
Okay. And where you say you wouldn't list everywhere now, why is that?
I think it's for brand control. And I had a really like strong idea of where the brand should be. It wasn't aligned with Etsy or, I mean, there are amazing brands for small businesses that are making jewelry, but I think the typical seller on Etsy or Not on the High Street are people that are making jewelry at their workshop, but that wasn't who we were. We were a design-led brand, not a maker brand. So I would have probably made the imagery like a bit more, I guess, elevated and pitched to Selfridges. If I were to do it all over again. I mean, nothing wrong with Etsy and Not on the High Street. I think they're amazing and I shop on them.
But, you know, it resonates with Messiah and Eve. We are in that place where we're not a maker brand. We are fragrance forward. We are definitely design led in terms of our formulations. We manufacture here in the UK. And it means that, yes, there are some places that, just like Astrid and Miyu, that marketplace or that platform is not the right fit, but balancing it with exactly what you said, getting it out there and getting people to see it.
Yeah, exactly. And managing cash flow as well, because we did sell a lot of units through those websites, and that was able to sustain the business.
What would you do differently?
Ooh, if I had to turn back time and go back to my early years, I would have invested in imagery a lot more, because I feel like I skimped on the imagery a little bit. So that's what I'd spend on.
Okay. How important is the functionality of your website and the platform that you choose to driving your DTC and your data?
Oh, I think it's so important, because we're on Shopify right now, and it's so amazing, especially for an omni-channel brand, because we can have a bird's eye view of our retail as well as our website, and we can have a one customer view. So we can take one customer and see exactly where they shopped at one point. So that's really important. And in terms of development, it's so much easier. I mean, I'm not trying to like advertise Shopify here, but we were working with another platform maybe 5-6 years ago, and it was a nightmare. We had to get developers involved in every single thing. With Shopify, it's plug and play. It's so intuitive. So we don't spend huge development costs either. So I think it's so important, the functionality and the look and feel as well, especially when you're a small brand. Like, this is your face. When you go pitch to retailers or influencers, that's the first thing, aside from your Instagram account, people will look at. Thank you so much, Sarah. It was so fun.
Thank you so much for having me and for answering all my questions. It's been really wonderful being here. Thank you.
If you're an early stage founder and you have a burning question you'd love me to answer, then DM us on Instagram at unbox_founder confidential. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to follow the podcast wherever you're listening or watching. You can follow me at Connie Nam, Astrid and Miyu at Astrid and Miyu, and the Unboxed Instagram page at unboxed_founder confidential. See you next week.